My name is Deb, and I'm a pastor's daughter. I learned early on that there were expectations to being in a preacher's family, and I began to spend my life trying to fit the image of being the good girl. Unfortunately, I wasn't very good at that. I began looking for love in all the wrong places, and at 21, when I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't bear to tell my parents. It was a moral failure that went against everything I was taught.
My name is Jason. I'm a husband and a dad, and I'm not proud of the fact that 20 years ago I got a girl pregnant. My girlfriend of 6 months told me she needed a ride to the doctor's office. I didn't know she was going there for an abortion until she hopped out of the car and told me why she was there and that she didn't need a ride home. She slammed the door, and I never saw her again.
I looked for a way out, but was surrounded by people who told me my only choice was abortion. Deep down, I knew it was wrong, but I felt trapped and needed to do something to hide this secret sin. It became the worst choice I ever made in my life.
I remember driving myself around that day feeling lost. Like a boat at sea with no rudder, I drove around in circles telling myself this was the best thing. I felt hopeless and frustrated because I couldn't do a thing to stop her. This was my kid too.
As I moved through life, the guilt and shame began to overwhelm me. In my destructive state of mind, I sabotaged myself by making poor relationship choices in order to gain acceptance. This resulted in another pregnancy, which ended in abortion. I struggled with low self-esteem and complete feelings of unworthiness. How could God love me? How could He forgive me?
I spent the next 7 years drowning myself in alcohol and drugs, trying to wash away the memory of my child's abortion. I fell into a destructive cycle of anger and rage. I would explode suddenly at people, and because of that, I couldn't keep friends or complete any projects.
I found a position in a church, and for 15 years, I led women's Bible studies in hopes that by serving, I could atone for my hidden sin. I loved these women and I didn't judge them, but I couldn't seem to apply the same non-judgmental standard to myself.
7 years after the abortion, I accepted Jesus as my Savior, but still battled with uncontrollable rage for 9 more years as a Christian, which negatively affected my professional, personal, and family life. I was still a very angry man.
I saw a movie that showed about the healing love of God and His ultimate forgiveness for abortion, and knew I had to seek this out for myself. My church was offering a post-abortion recovery group, and I felt a new stirring in my heart. Who knows? Maybe God could use me to help other post-abortive women one day.
I attended a men's retreat where I heard Saul Pichon speak about the post-abortion group for men. Before Saul finished speaking, I exploded inside as God unleashed a tidal wave of conviction so strong that I started weeping. It was the first time that I cried for the loss of my child.
I attended the Passages of Hope Bible study and recovery group, where God began tearing down the lies the enemy had been telling me all these years. It was so difficult, and yet Jesus walked me through my grief, my despair, and my self-hatred to let me know I am truly forgiven and set free.
Passages for Men taught me to recognize how the guilt and the shame I felt were the root cause of so much strife and anguish that I was creating for myself. I was halfway through the 9-week Passages course when, like a boat anchor being released from the bottom, I felt the burdens of the past fall off my shoulders and I could move forward.
My name is Deb. I am honored to serve as a Passages of Hope facilitator where, after 9 weeks of Bible study, I get to see women leave the final session released from shame with their heads held high as their hearts embrace a renewed hope for the future.
My name is Jason, and I know attending Passages for Men gave me and my family hope for a stable, calm, and blessed future. How do I know this? About 3 weeks after the group ended, my 5-year-old said to me, "Daddy, I like that you don't yell anymore."
Hello, and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. More to the Story is about educating about abortion, one story at a time. And today we have another great guest with us to share her story and the importance of healing and recovery after an abortion. Before I introduce my special guest, I'd like to give a shout out to Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. He's been a great sponsor for this show, and we really couldn't do it without him. So I just want to give him all the credit for helping us get this show on the air. And I also want to let you know that my awesome co-host, Mary Browning, is recovering from COVID. So I'd appreciate prayers for her to continue that healing journey. And I'll be flying solo today. So I hope you're patient with me. Now, I do want to give you a disclaimer. If you're listening, and I hope you are, and I hope you invite all of your other friends and everyone you know who's been impacted by an abortion or who's had an abortion in their past, whether it's you or a family member, a friend, someone you know, these podcasts are real important to minister to these hurting men and women. And so I would love for you to, invite them to tune in and watch or share the link with them when you have time, because our whole goal too is to encourage women and men to go through abortion recovery. And so they won't be sitting in silence and shame anymore. But we do have a disclaimer. Sometimes you can be triggered. Sometimes emotions can rise up when you are hearing someone else's testimony, or we're talking, even the word abortion could trigger some anger or some shame. And so we just want to let you know that there is help and healing. We have a helpline number that's going across the bottom of the screen. You can go to operationoutcry.org website, where there's a list of abortion recovery programs available to you in your area. And the helpline is a national 24/7 call-in line where women are on the other end who've had an abortion. And so they know and understand what you may be feeling and going through. And they're very willing to help get you connected to an abortion recovery ministry in your location. So we want to encourage you to do that. And this whole month of January and hopefully going into February, it's been my goal to expose Planned Parenthood for who they really are. And in the last couple of recordings we did, we had a guest with American Life League, who's an expert in the Planned Parenthood industry. And it's really, it's a racist organization that has eugenics desires to depopulate the world. They're all about preventing women from having children, preventing women and men from getting pregnant. And so we want to continue that theme and continue the education that when you go to a Planned Parenthood clinic, even if you're not sure if you're pregnant or not, and you are by a test that they would run, or if you're going there seeking information about abortion, or even schedule an appointment for an abortion, but you have questions, the likelihood of you leaving that facility without abortion is very slim, because their whole goal is to make sure you don't leave there pregnant. And so I believe my special guest today has had an experience such as that. And she's going to come in and share her testimony. And then we're going to talk about the importance of healing. So I would like to introduce my very special guest today. Deb, if you would come in and say hello to everyone and give us a little bit of background about you.
Well, thank you, Molly, so much. I really appreciate being here. So my background, basically, I am a preacher's daughter, grew up in a preacher's family, and I was always the good girl, did what I was told, always had good grades. I'm the oldest, the only daughter. Along the way into high school and in all of those things, I had approval addiction. I wanted people to like me. So then I began to test those waters in the areas of sexual promiscuity, and finished college at 21. I was on my own, and I discovered I was pregnant. There was no relationship per se with the person, the man I was involved with. I didn't even tell him I'd gotten pregnant. Went ahead and friends around me had said, let's go, take you to the abortion clinic. It was absolutely horrible. My conscience, my spirit would not want me there, but yet out of just sheer desperation, I was there. Because of that first abortion, I then was in a place of a cycle where I continued to seek men's acceptance. I continued to do the wrong things, be with the wrong people. And I found myself pregnant about 5 years later. But at this point, I had in my own way, as I said, I'm a preacher's daughter, but I had found my own faith. And so I was beginning to really see where God was wanting me to be. I was born again and I was in the right place with the right people. And so even though I was still doing those things in the background that were a cause for all of the things I was going through in the past, I still knew God had hope for me. So I had my child, and she is 34, almost 35 years old today. But then, because I was not married, and I ended up coming to where my parents lived at the time, and saw a lot of shame and guilt in the church because of me being pregnant, I got pregnant again. And it was like a year and a half after my daughter was born. And I said, oh my goodness, now I'm going to do this again. And I know there's a percentage. If you've already had one abortion, it is a lot more likely to have another or multiple. So I reached out again into that awful place and had another abortion.
Okay, can I stop you right there, Deb? Because that's a very compelling testimony. And what I wrote down a couple of things, but one is, you know, when you went to the clinic, and I don't know if it was a Planned Parenthood clinic or a different one, did they give you options? Did they offer any kind of support? Did they tell you about the procedure? Did they tell you that there could be some psychological risk or physical risks?
No.
So that's what I want to clarify with our audience today, is that when you go into an abortion clinic, and I've heard maybe one testimony out of thousands, that they were told what to expect, but really you're not given any other option or explained what's going to happen to you
No.
when you go through that procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just dare to say that it wasn't fully consensual.
I remember making the appointment, and I remember my best friend saying to me, I'll go with you. And at the last minute, she said, my mom's going with you. So apparently she told her mom. We were both about 21, and her mom said, I'm taking her, not you. She didn't want her to go. She didn't want her to see the horrors of that place. So I was with her mother, and I felt more shame because I'm like, here's this woman taking me that I don't know really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going it's called my name, and I just go back, and they have to do the ultrasound to see how far along you are. And I remember I'm on the table crying, and the woman next to me, the nurse, grabbed my hand. It's going to be okay. That was all.
Yeah.
I knew it was wrong, and I knew, oh my goodness, can I just get out of here? Can I run out of here and never come back? It's going to be okay. That's the only thing they even shared.
Yeah. And that's not true. It's not going to be okay.
No.
And in that situation, when a patient, I would say a woman, starts crying and she's having second thought, she's unsure, that's when they're supposed to stop and say, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
How can we help you?
No.
Is this really what you want to do? They do not offer any of that whatsoever. Like I said, if you go in there pregnant, you're not coming out with the child intact.
No.
You're not coming out pregnant. And so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just kind of want our audience who does not know and understand the workings of the abortion industry, that's part of the trauma too that we endure. I mean, if we were told the truth, if we were given any other kind of options, any other kind of help or support, we may have not have made that devastating lifelong choice.
Yes.
And I know you've probably heard it many, many times because you've gone on to become involved in abortion recovery. But I want you to go ahead and continue your story.
Okay. As I mentioned, then my daughter is about a year and a half old. I get pregnant. I'm in a relationship. I get pregnant again. And I think in the back of my mind, I remember that man saying, well, I don't want to marry you, but I'll help you with the child. And I thought, that's so there was this, just wait a minute. No, I don't, I want to be married. And so I remember thinking that and saying, well, then I can't do this. And I couldn't have another child and go back to the church where my family was and such and say, oh, there she is. She just keeps, having children. So the shame of what's culture and society was saying to me was greater than the shame of another abortion. So that,
or it's greater than the value of human life.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, absolutely. After that, again, the cycle continued for me because I didn't get healing. I knew who God was, and I knew that, well, he's probably not so happy with me because I've made these choices, but I knew he loved me in a certain way. But I kept saying these sins are not forgivable. So I ended up going to work at a church. I worked at a church. I was on staff. I remember thinking, okay, God, I'm going to pay you back for the wrongs I did. I was in the administration side of the church, but I would lead Bible studies. And I'd also gotten married to a man. We didn't have or plan any children, but he was the wrong man. So I made the wrong choice to be with a man just to say, now I'm married. I have the facade of a husband, and I have my daughter, and he had a child, and okay, it's good.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of my mindset, doing what the world offered in hopes it would make me happy and stable.
Yeah. And it was the wrong. I mean, after 7 years of marriage, we got divorced, and prior to the 7 years, we were separated for a year or two. It just wasn't right. And my daughter, I was very aware she needed to be with a father, a stepfather that was going to give her right guidance, and this man was not in his way. So right after we got divorced, I connected with another man, and in a few months I was pregnant again. I was working at my church. I'm in my early 40s. My daughter's middle school. I'm like, I can't, how am I going to do this? If I tell the pastors, the staff at the church I'm pregnant, they're going to immediately fire me. So I see that looking back. Again, what you just said, Molly, the value of life, of human life, wasn't in my scope. I was just like, oh, this is going to be an embarrassment. I'm going to have my character. I can't.
Self-protective mode.
Yeah.
We're in a self-destructive mode because we're not healed. We're in a self-destructive mode, but then we get pregnant and we become a self-protective mode because we need to protect, our pride or our, our job or our status,
So I told the father, and he said, I don't want this. I don't want this. And I thought, okay, here we are. So I proceeded to have a third abortion. Again, early 40s of my life. So within 20 years, I had 4 pregnancies, 1 live birth, and 3 abortions. So that all just kept compounding, and all of the guilt and the shame and the self-loathing and all of these things just kept.
And the secrecy, and the
working at my church,
inner destruction, the guilt, the shame, all of those things.
If they knew what I did, what would they think of me?
Right.
And when I was leading Bible studies at the church, I was thinking, I give everyone who comes grace. I would never want anyone to feel like I felt. So and we never got into subjects like that in these Bible studies at that point prior to my healing. So that's where I remember thinking, and God, through his Spirit, said to me, you don't owe, the price was already paid. Jesus paid the price. And I went, here I was trying to make it all up, and I'm still making bad choices. And no, that's what Jesus did for you. So then God aligned me with a local pregnancy center and a woman there who was leading abortion recovery studies. So I took my first group then, and I said, you, God, are going to use me in some way. You're going to use me.
Mm.
And I proceeded to go through the group a second time. And then I was having other women come to the group through my church and things like that. It's just led to many wonderful things that way. So to say this, just because you've gone through one study, I had multiple abortions. I went through it a second time to really see more healing.
Right. And sometimes we need to have more than one to focus on each individual pregnancy and
Yes.
situation. You know, I've been
Yes.
through several of them
Mhm.
myself. But
Mhm.
I do want to kind of recap a little bit. You know, you said earlier that once you've had one abortion, you're more likely to have a second, third, fourth. And I've been through some incredible training in inner childhood healing, wounds and abortion recovery, and it's kind of like this cycle of, well, if I get pregnant again, then maybe this time the situation will be better and I won't have to make that choice. And it's really, the situation's never better. Or if you're still wounded or your heart's a little hardened, I've
Mhm.
done it before,
Mhm.
and then your heart's a little bit more hardened. You're more protective and you're more likely to do that again. And so the important thing is, I think I want for our listeners and our viewers to understand, if you've had one, go through abortion recovery as
Yes.
quickly as possible, whether you
Yes.
think you're wounded or not,
Yes.
whether you realize the trauma that's come from that or not,
Yeah.
you to break that cycle, to go through that healing and to prevent years of
Yes.
destructive decisions and behaviors, which
Yes.
bring more trauma, and more things to have to deal with and
Mhm.
heal
Mhm.
from in our future. So let me ask you this. How long was it between your last abortion and then entering into abortion recovery?
It was after my last abortion and then doing the Bible study. It was probably about 3 years.
Okay. So that's pretty quick, because the average could be 13 years, 15 years
Yeah.
before, after a woman's had an abortion and before she goes through recovery.
Yeah. And that was from my 20s till my 40s. That was, going
Okay.
on 30 years where I was just, a mess in so many areas of my life. I mean, I know other stories of, alcohol abuse and drug abuse and that. I probably did go out to bars and have, drinks and things, but mine was more on the side of like financial just ruin, because I thought, well, I don't deserve to have an income. I just
Mhm.
deserve to wallow in this paycheck to paycheck thing, because why would God give me anything good when I'm
Right.
going through all these other things? And so,
Really, yeah, it really destroys our self-worth,
yes,
our self-value, our self-esteem. And so you go through the Bible study,
mhm,
and I know it's life changing.
it
It's
was,
transformational.
it was,
And then I believe you wanted that for other women as well.
yes, yes. And with my situation, again, there are a lot of women sitting in churches, whether they are a preacher's child or whether they are a churchgoer, that have been going to church for a long time, and then they make that decision. It's like, you want to understand that you are just, someone else has gone through what you've gone through. And
Right.
so I wanted to say, this story has to get out. It has to.
Amen. And that's why, one of the reasons for more to the story is that, your story doesn't have to be the same. Number one, you
Right.
don't have to be stuck in a story of having an abortion and not go through healing and
Mhm.
be stuck in the bondage of that and the trauma of that. You know, there is redeeming grace through Jesus Christ. He wants his daughters to be saved, delivered, and healed, and then to use that for a greater purpose.
Yes.
Like he has used you for many years in leading women through abortion recovery. And can you tell us a little bit about those programs?
Yes, absolutely. So I started with an organization, the same one that I had gone through my first Bible study with, Passages of Hope out of New Life Solutions in Largo, Florida. And then I was involved on staff in that particular program and got to really build with our director, Susan. We built an amazing program where we would do Equip to Heal trainings that would include anybody that wanted to know how to learn to heal, others perhaps, and then they would realize I need to do this group. And so we would begin to get people, women and men, that would come through our abortion recovery groups. One of the other things we incorporated was a similar study, Forgiven and Set Free, of course, Linda Cochran, and her other study, The Path to Sexual Healing.
Mhm.
We went through that together, my director and I, and included some other women. And then we could see how that was a catalyst for women to say, well, I'm not merely going to tell you about my abortion yet, but I'm going to go through the path to sexual healing. And whether or not you were sexually abused or had sexual trauma, or you were dealing with sexual promiscuity, which was me, you got additional healing in that realm of your life. But it also helped women to say, you know what? I have an abortion in my life. So I'm going to go ahead and now go to do the Forgiven and Set Free. So it went both ways. And it was so remarkable to see the changes in women. So I also became involved with Deeper Still out of Knoxville, and helped to start a Tampa Bay chapter down here 3 years ago. And that was remarkable. Loved the weekend recovery program. It was amazing to see how women and men changed. And we did see, of course, women and men in the same retreat, but men would minister to the men and women would minister to the women.
Mm-hmm.
I am now involved with, it's called Healing Grace in Oasis Pregnancy Center in the Tampa area. And I'm currently working on leading the path of sexual healing is where I'm focusing now. But I also have recently done the CareNet training to do the upgraded Forgiven and Set Free Bible study. So I'm truly enjoying where God brings me now, each of these different places he's brought me, and to see that he's not done with me yet, that there's still more places to go. And I will say, I went back to my original pastors later and told him what had happened while I was on staff. And I said to him, I just want to be a catalyst for people who have made that mistake, but then they don't, the consequence of that action by having premarital sex outside of marriage is one sin. But the second sin that I did was I then had an abortion to cover that sin. So how do we come around people who may be in a role or maybe in a place and they don't want to be discovered, but they are going to make that horrible decision? So it's just getting the word out to churches that come around us and give us grace and give us correction.
Amen.
In a way that can save these children and save lives.
You're so absolutely right. And one of the main reasons that Christian women have abortions is because they're afraid they'll be ostracized or kicked out of the church or condemned, and so you're making a decision based out of fear, and we need to really get the church mindset that, first of all, we need to talk about the harms of abortion. We need to have women sharing their testimonies. We need to be educating the congregation about the harm of abortion and how it impacts not only the women and men, but the extended family, the families and society, and be a place of refuge. The example I see is that, the Pharisees brought the woman that was caught in adultery and threw her out there in front of Yeshua, Jesus, naked and full of her shame and disgrace. And he did not condemn her. He did not throw stones at her.
Amen.
He gave her grace and say, go and sin no more. And that's the way the church needs to respond, like Jesus did. And then also, there's more than one person involved in an abortion decision.
Yes.
It's not always the weight on the woman. There's a man involved as well that needs to be educated, number one, about fatherhood and responsibility and sexual purity and responsibility. But also, the healing for men who've gone through abortion, and even siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. I mean, it just reaches so many people. So on that note, I'm going to look at my notes here. I want you to speak to the woman who is so caught up in shame and guilt and self-hatred that she doesn't feel, or even he, um, that healing is and forgiveness is available to her, or that she even deserves it,
Mm-hmm.
or that she thinks, I'm fine. Even me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
forgiven. I'm okay. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't okay. I was forgiven, but I wasn't okay. Speak to her. She's looking right at you.
Yeah. Yes. It was 20, 30 years for me, and that shame just was so heavy. That shame didn't go away. You tried to numb it perhaps by spending time out, going places, alcohol, that kind of thing. But when you come to one of the studies, whether it's a weekend event like Sisters of Rachel or Deeper Still or any of those,
That are
you
completely confidential,
completely
private, and free.
confidential.
Most of
Thank
them are
you.
free or just very little. Mhm.
Yes, and same thing with Bible studies. We don't just have it in the church hallway.
Right.
We make sure that everybody is comfortable with being private and confidential, and the groups stay confidential. We don't bring new people in after a week or 2 weeks. It's closed,
Right.
so you
Right.
get the benefit. But you sit in that healing Bible study, that healing weekend, and you are protected. You can be vulnerable with the people around you. The women around you have walked through something just like you, and you build a bond with them. But the thing I think about is a prison cell, and that prison cell door is open, but we're still sitting in it
Mhm.
because we don't think we deserve to step out. But I see Jesus's hand, and he's saying, come. So these studies are a way to come. And there is fear. Of course, you're walking into something you don't know anything, but the people who are there, the volunteers, and we're here to just give you hope.
Yeah.
And that is really where the most important part of just having someone walk hand in hand with you. You feel safe, you feel, protected, and you're protected. And God brings you to a place in Jesus of healing,
Mhm.
because you see all of these different areas in the healing process about grief. The grief that we have as losing a child through abortion is a different grief than someone who miscarried,
Mhm.
um, lost their child in birth. So we still have grief, and we walk through that grief in a different way, but we come through on the other side of
Mhm.
all of those things in the process, and we come to healing.
Amen. And thank you for that, because that's our goal, is to encourage every woman and man out there who's had an abortion in your past to go through healing. More to the story is not a healing program, but we provide all kinds of information for you to get the hope and the healing that you need. You can go to operationoutcry.org. There's a page of all the abortion recovery programs available to you. There is the helpline number, and I believe we even had your contact information down there too, Deb. So thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you.
And so I just want to leave you with this. Um, don't stay stuck in your shame. Don't stay stuck in your guilt. Don't stay stuck, because God has a better plan for you.
Yes.
Healing is not easy. Recovery is not a fun thing to go through. But God catches every one of our tears, and then He holds on to those, and then He takes us, and completely restores us into a new creature, a new
Yeah.
creation that He has a plan and a purpose for. Well, thank you so much for coming on to More to the Story and sharing your story. And I hope and pray that it's encouraged you out there, to um, go through the healing yourself, or to provide that information for someone who's hurting. So we thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on as a special guest, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you, Molly.